Also, do you like my hoodie? It says existential dread,
Yeah, it's pretty
but
good.
it's like a
Is
old
that like the
jersey.
Vancouver Grizzlies?
Yeah. I don't know. Some website targeted me on Facebook because my targeted ads at this point have gotten to be just phenomenal. Like, I don't know who runs that algorithm, but they've got me pegged. There is
Damn,
nothing that gets advertised to me on Facebook or Twitter that I don't want to buy at this point.
I
So
feel that.
whoever's running that algorithm is doing a phenomenal job. But you know what? We're already recording. Let's just roll right into it. Hey, everyone. Welcome to
Oh,
another
hey.
episode.
I was
uh, we're here. I'm Jeremy. That's Meech.
what
And
up?
we're going to talk to you about the Big 12 today. Uh, the what I consider to be one of the most simultaneously entertaining and also boring conferences in football. And I mean that because entertaining and that no one plays defense.
Right, which is
Boring,
very your brand.
which is that's my brand. My brand is I wish no one played any. I wish it was 7-on-7. Just no defense
Just flag
whatsoever.
football.
Yeah, basically flag football. But very my brand to say no defense. But it's also so boring because, and we'll get into this, but basically all of the teams have been exactly the same for the last handful of years. Like it's one of the more predictable conferences in college football, and that basically every team, which is probably a good thing for their programs, but every team's had basically the same identity for the last 5 to 10 years. And we could delve into that relatively quickly. Obviously, there's been some volatility with certain programs. But do you want to just dive right into this, Meech?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just gonna say like it is such a weird conference because of how they have it set up where everybody plays everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So that in itself just lends to weirdness and that kind of it's weird. It's almost like it ensures that the best teams are gonna be the best teams
Right.
because you know what I mean. So in that way, it is kind of interesting. But you do have those like sort of outlier type seasons like TCU in 2014 and even Baylor in 2014,
Right.
uh, where if things start clicking right for a program at the right time, where they get the right offense around like a resurgent defense with a good coaching staff, like anything could happen. And I think there's a couple teams that you could make that argument for this year, but we'll get to that when we get to them, right?
Right. And then they get to go on probation for a few years after that, and then they'll be back.
Well, we
That's
don't
how.
have to talk about. I mean, which brings us to Baylor, right?
Right.
But
That's where we got to start. If we're talking about probation, you got to talk about Baylor, huh?
who I don't, yeah, like I'm obviously not going to touch anything that happened back in the day with the
No.
10-foot pole. Like that's all been discussed and
Mm-hmm.
but all things considered, Matt Rule has done probably just about as good of a job as you could hope for. Inheriting a program that was one looked like it might have been on the verge of getting the death penalty,
Right.
and two, there was a huge exodus of talent because they were trying to cleanse the roster of the Art Briles dudes that he brought in, and I mean, you saw it the first year they went what 1-12, and
Right.
last year, second year, he bounces back with 7-6, and this is a team that looks like they're headed in the right direction. I don't know if it'll ever get back to the peak level that it was
Right.
under Art Briles with Robert Griffin III obviously winning the Heisman,
And
and
Bryce Petty.
there was that year where they were in the inaugural year of the playoff. It was them and TCU. One of them like probably should have made the
Right.
play.
I
Uh,
forgot about that. Yeah, you're right. They were the first two out right there. I forgot about that.
Right. So I don't know if it'll ever get back to that level, but I certainly like what they have coming back this year. And, they won 7 games last year. 9 to 10 feels doable to me, considering where some of the other schools in the conference are trending.
Yeah, I think that Baylor is one of those interesting teams this year that like has the opportunity to take sort of a big step. Like you mentioned, they were at 7 wins last year in the Big 12. Um, you know who the top end teams are going to be. You know who the bottom end. Baylor's right there in the middle, having the chance to be either or. But with everything in the way that it shakes out for their roster this year, it does feel like uh, they're on the verge of a very big season. Mostly because
Right.
when you look at it, 4 of their 5 starters along the offensive line are back. Their quarterback is back. A lot of their defense is returning. And like I said, not a lot of defense gets played in this conference, but it's nice to at least know that, when you do bring back a lot of your defense, at least they're capable of playing some defense when you need it late.
Right, and that's the thing. That's sort of the thing that separates these middle class teams and raises them up tiers, right? So like Iowa State last year had a great defense, and that's why they
Right.
finished third in the Big 12. If you're not Oklahoma or Texas, where you have those inherent recruiting advantages or
Exactly.
history, and you're bringing in 5 stars on both sides of the ball, like you have to play some sort of defense. So and Matt Rule is a defensive coach, and I
Well,
think
right.
what you said about the offensive line, all the experience coming back there, he wants to run the ball, and
Right.
I mean, it just sets up to me where I feel like this team could really, really take a leap in a positive direction.
In a very strange way, this Baylor team sort of feels like they're going to play the way Memphis plays.
Yeah,
They're going to
exactly.
try look, Memphis of last year, pound the rock, try to get a lead early, let your defense do some work. But because this team does have a really trustworthy quarterback and that he's back, they do have their head coach. That means something, to have your head coach come back even after he was sort of recruited over to the NFL. And you have a lot
Right,
of
he turned down the Jets.
right. He turned down the Jets. He turned down the Jets to stay at Baylor. But
Yeah,
it's a very bizarre combo. But still, nonetheless, you have a team that I think expectations should be very high. And when you take a peek at their schedule, most of their tougher games are at home, which is really nice. When you
right,
are
because
one
they're a
of
team
those
where that actually can make a difference.
exactly like Baylor number one has a decent home crowd, but number two, it's like we've mentioned previously in past episodes when you're a team that is near the top of a conference and you're trying to sort of pull off the upsets and
Go
you're
up a level.
trying to go
Yeah.
up a level, it's great to have your tougher games at home because maybe you can steal some of them. When you're a team that's near the bottom, you're hoping to have your tough games on the road because those are the throwaways and you're hoping to get those
Yeah, we're not
field
going to
goals.
win that anyway, right?
Exactly. So Baylor is one of those teams that going into this season, they were hopeful that, I mean, obviously, what your schedule is years in advance, but as you uh, took a look at the schedule, once you knew what your team was actually going to look like here in 2019, this is the perfect schedule for a team like Baylor because you're playing a lot of your tougher games at home and your easier games on the road, so you can go in and beat those teams in their house and then possibly pull off a couple of upsets at home. So I think Baylor should look at like a 9 or 10 win season, and
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 what
and be unhappy if they don't get to 9 wins. I think it would be a disappointment of a season.
I don't disagree. I think they have enough coming back where you could make that argument. And I think what'll be very interesting because they'll probably start 3-0 with that out of conference schedule, right?
Right,
But what's really interesting, and we can get into the team that they play in week 4, that
right.
matchup against Iowa State, that's like the battle for, to me, like those two teams in TCU of who could, crest up above and become like a conference title contender.
Well,
Because
right.
right now, all people are talking about are Oklahoma and Texas again, and rightfully so to some
Mhm.
degree. But Iowa State, I mean, once they put Brock Purdy in last year, they were a
Yeah.
completely different team. And so he's back, and I really, really, really like him. I think he's got
Mhm.
future like top 7 college football quarterback type potential,
Really.
right? Yeah, I mean, I just really like the way he plays.
Mhm.
So he was a true freshman last year, and in 10 games, threw for 2,250 yards with 16 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. You have to
Yeah.
assume with a whole season now being the starter, the whole offseason, I mean, they lost their 2 best offensive players with David Montgomery going to the Bears, and I believe Hakeem Butler ended up with the Cardinals in the
Right.
draft.
Yes.
I mean, you're replacing some serious production there, but I mean, you have a very promising young quarterback who I think can put maybe not put the entire offense on his shoulders, but he can certainly shoulder a big amount of the load. And
Mhm.
like we talked about, their defense was one of the better in the conference last year, and sometimes that's all you need. That's what you need to get over the hump. So, and they
Right.
don't
Well,
really lose
especially
much
with an
on
electric
defense.
quarterback like that. Especially with
Right.
that. Yeah, I
Yeah,
guess.
because
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no. Go ahead. Go ahead.
All right. So I guess where I'm at is that it's like we just talked about with Baylor. Good quarterback. You got your coach. You got some of your defense coming back, and you feel pretty good about it. I mean, there's a reason that Iowa State finished third in the conference last year. They obviously were a team that sort of overachieved for what our expectations were last year, but they do miss some playmakers, obviously. I mean, David Montgomery, like everybody's obsessed with him for fantasy football this year going forward. It's
Yeah.
this very weird thing where he's getting like all this fantasy love, like, oh my God, David Montgomery out of Iowa State, which is not something like anyone ever expects to hear. Yes, this rookie running back out of Iowa State is going to be your fantasy steal.
But he was electric. I
But
mean,
he's electric. No, but that was my point. That's what I was going to get to is he was electric. Hakeem Butler was pretty electric. That offense really clicked with those guys. And without those two legit NFL playmakers, I mean, that's not exactly easy to replicate. That said, like you mentioned, Brock Purdy is legitimately a good quarterback. And so theoretically, it's not really going to matter that some of those playmakers are gone. I do think, though, that it should be similar expectations to Baylor. Hoping for a 9 or 10 win season. I kind of think they'll probably finish right around 8 again, mostly because couple tough road games. We can't pretend like those don't exist. When you do have to go to Oklahoma, that should be pretty much a scheduled loss, you would think. Going to Baylor.
I don't know, man. Matt Campbell's he beat Baker Mayfield in Stillwater.
That's fair. No, you're not wrong. I mean, you're not wrong. I'm just saying, like, when you do check it out, I'm not saying that it definitely will be a loss, but I guess it's just like probably a loss, right? And at Baylor, when you're similar level of teams like going on the road, I guess that's my point. Is you split home and road between Texas and Oklahoma. And then you've got teams like West Virginia and Baylor on the road. That's difficult to overcome. That said, Iowa State is one of those teams because of their young electric quarterback that could make some serious noise in this conference.
No, I don't disagree. I wouldn't be surprised if Baylor or Iowa State won 10 games, in all honesty.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it can't be both. More often than not, it's going to be one or the other because, number one, they play each other. And number two, you expect Texas and Oklahoma to be at the top of the conference. It would take one of those teams being legitimately disappointing to have Iowa State or Baylor make a legitimate run toward the conference championship. That said, it's interesting that we get to start with those two teams alphabetically because they're probably the two biggest X factors in the conference in terms of like having a chance to make a run and then, seeing where it goes from there.
All right. So a team that definitely will not win 10 games this year.
What?
I don't think they've won 10 games combined over the last 6 seasons, honestly.
Oh my God, you're probably right, actually.
Hey, if I send you a Facebook message real quick, can you open it?
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to send you
this in? Or is this something we're keeping in here? You just
no. Yeah, keep it in. Keep it in. I want you to, because I'm going to send you this picture, and I want to include it in the YouTube video.
Okay.
All right. So.
All right. It is sent.
All right. So, hear me out. Let's talk. First, we're talking about Kansas, and then we'll get to the picture. Okay.
I just looked at it.
Yes. We'll get to that in a second. So. Okay. Obviously, Les Miles is in Kansas now. So it'll be his first. Are you still looking at the picture?
I can't not look at the picture. I'm listening to you, but I'm gonna break down this picture in my brain, and then everyone's gonna be really excited when they see it.
All right. So Les Miles, obviously, his first season at Kansas. They've been probably with Rutgers one of the worst Power 5 conferences over the last 5 to 10 years. But there's some optimism to be had with Les Miles, I guess. They're coming off 3 wins last season, which is more than they've had in a while. And, Puka Williams did a disgusting thing and is suspended for only 1 game. But that doesn't take away from the fact that he's a solid college football player and was awesome as a freshman last year.
Really good college
he was first team all Big 12 as a freshman, right? So
yeah.
I mean, he misses their first game, which I believe is against Indiana State.
Right.
And Larry Bird's not walking through that door. So
Larry Bird's not walking through that door. That's amazing.
So, they don't have a quarterback. Have they ever had a quarterback, really?
No, neither has Les Miles ever.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's literally there's no difference, right? He's used to that.
He's used to no quarter. I mean, I guess he's had decent quarterbacks at some point. I mean, right? Mettenberger?
Sure. Yeah, Mettenberger, who couldn't lead a top 10 offense with Jarvis Landry and
right. So
Jeremy
fair. He's had no quarterbacks. All right, that's fine.
Yeah. So, But anyway, so I don't think I mean, they should win against Indiana State and Coastal Carolina.
Mhm.
Could they get past 3 wins? Probably. Maybe. Let me tell them that maybe.
Maybe.
But they're going to rely on a lot of, they have relied on a lot of junior college transfers over the last
Mhm.
couple of years with David Beatty. So I mean, if I'm Les Miles, I just take this as year zero and just play as many of the young guys as I can, and get ready
Yeah.
for building what we have next season.
Well,
And also, so now we can get a picture.
oh yeah. Okay.
So one of their notable players that they have on defense is a kid I actually played JV football with.
Incredible.
So you could, we're gonna put the picture on the screen. Do you have anything to say
I'm
about Candace
just
or also the picture?
just zoom in. Look at what a badass Meech is, bro. Like I'm just gonna zoom in on your face. This is remarkable. This is remarkable. Just
I was
so is this photo booth editing? Like what
I
editing?
don't know. One of the guys in the picture actually edited that. I think that
Like
was with one of those early iPhone app like phone editing.
it's so unsurprising and I love it so much.
So that's me in the middle, obviously, and then
No.
on the left there, yeah, surprisingly enough, I'm the white kid in the middle, and then on the left, number 7 there, he actually plays safety at Kansas now, and he's actually really good last year. He was all conference honorable mention.
Who
So
was this? Who was this?
Hassan Defense,
That's amazing.
yeah. So I mean, he had 3 interceptions last year, 7 pass breakups. I
I mean,
mean,
he's got the perfect name for a safety.
right, exactly. So,
Defense.
I mean, I'll definitely be watching just to see my I don't know if I could call him my good friend, but my pal Hassan out there, I guess.
I'm in such a state of shock over what this picture looked like that I just like Meech, what even are you, bro? What
Uh,
even was
I
that? That
I
was
wish I could tell
incredible. Yeah. I don't think Kansas is gonna be any good. They're gonna eat a lot more grass this year. That's good.
you. I mean, that's definitely I think that's good
There
for digestive
there
system.
is 100% more grass that will be eaten by their head coach than
Without
last year.
question.
Yeah, which is always a good thing. Eating more grass is normally a positive thing. I guess like though for their sake, like start 2-0 and then hope to go upset Boston College, but like probably not. Like, are they going to get like right? Like that's where that would be the peak of their season. Like the peak of their season would be being 3-0 because they'll probably lose every game after that.
I don't think there's much more we have to say about
Yeah,
that.
that's it. Bye, Kansas.
Let's go to their in-state, I guess, rival, if you want to call them that.
Sure, sure.
Kansas State, who Chris Kleiman is now here. They
Right.
no longer have Bill Snyder, who was seemingly there for
100 years.
probably actually 100 years.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
always weird when the head coach is coaching in the stadium that's named after him.
Right,
Uh, but so Chris Kleiman's here. He's obviously off that North Dakota State coaching tree.
right.
After Craig Bull left to go to Iowa or Idaho, I believe
Yeah,
is where he's at.
I
Josh
think
Allen.
so. Yeah, Idaho.
Yeah. So no,
Yeah,
Wyoming. I'm sorry,
yeah. Wyoming
Wyoming.
is what you meant. Yeah,
Yeah. But so Kleiman's there now. He really kept the train rolling at North Dakota State. They did not miss a beat. I believe they won 2 or 3 more national championships with him at the helm. And so now he's at Kansas State, which has been under the rule of pretty much one man for a very long time. And when they weren't, they were a bad football team. So the
right.
fans kind of have this loyalty towards Bill Snyder and the Bill Snyder kind of coaching philosophy. So it'll be interesting for me to see with Kansas State if things get bumpy early, which they
Right.
could. I mean, they don't have a tough schedule, but I mean, they open with Nichols and Bowling Green, which is a good opportunity to get their feet under them, right? But
Right.
then, I mean, then they go on the road to play Mississippi State, who is going to probably be one of the best defensive teams in the country. And then they
Right.
go and play Oklahoma State, which is a complete role reversal, is one of the best
Right. They're
offense.
just gonna air it out.
So, I mean, they lost their 2 leading rushers last year, who were both all Big Ten, Big 12, which is crazy.
Right.
Dalton Reisner's gone on the offensive line. Their best wide receiver transferred in the offseason to Mississippi State,
Right. Who they gotta go
play
play?
in week 3. I mean, really, the only player that they have returning on offense is Skylar Thompson, and he wasn't even the full-time starter last year. So
Yeah, eesh, it could get ugly for Kansas State. And it's not to say that Kansas State is going to be like a bad football team, but it's everything that you just pointed out about their schedule. And like, sure, Skylar Thompson will be fine. Like, eh, eh,
he's
they've
kind
had
of built in the mold of successful quarterbacks to
right,
climb in his coach,
right, which is
for
cool.
whatever
You
that's
big
worth.
athletic dude, that's fine. I just like I don't see a ton of athletes on the offensive side of the ball to help him. And the most interesting part of the season is what you mentioned at the beginning. How is the fan base going to react to this guy climbing? Because
Right.
Bill Snyder left. He wanted his son to take over.
Right.
Kleiman now takes over.
And this was a problem the first time Bill Snyder left.
Right, and
Succession of power.
right, and so there's such an identity there, and I could kind of easily see them being 2-5, like starting 2-0, and then losing at Mississippi State, at Oklahoma State, and then to Baylor, TCU, and Oklahoma. And if you lose those 3 games in a row at home, that's going to be the most interesting part of the season, right? Like, can they do enough, win a game or two of those at home so that the fan base doesn't turn on Chris Kleiman? Because I think if they get down to 2-5,
Then you're going
probably
to start hearing some rumblings, right?
like real quickly.
And
And
it's a shame because
well, yeah,
I feel like the culture, like if you bring it's inarguable. The culture that was at North Dakota State is what helped them win games, right?
obviously,
Like,
yeah,
so it becomes the question of how much of that can Chris Kleiman install with the
quickly,
pressure that is inevitably going to come from outside forces, right?
right,
So, I
yeah,
mean, yeah, if
I,
I was him, I would just take this year, like chalk it up to whatever it's going to be, and you just start getting your guys in the program. You
right,
start, hey, this is how I know how they used to do it with Bill Snyder, but this is how we are doing it here now.
right,
And
and you got to
if it,
accept that what you're about to do is going to change an identity, and you have to just PR wise, you have to be very careful about how you say that though, because if
right,
not,
exactly.
it's like, look, we're looking to advance our identity. We're not looking to change everything, but we're looking to update. We're looking to bring it forward into our future, blah, 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 blah. Because if you try to say you're changing things and then you go 2-5 or 3-4 in your first 7 games,
Yeah, but this is the thing
then
with Kansas State fans, though, is how upset should you be if they are changing things? Because
oh, you
what has
shouldn't
been
be.
there,
You haven't been good.
what has it? Yeah, since
Is it
what
Josh
was the
Freeman?
high? No, 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 no. They had almost one year where they had the Heisman finalist
Oh,
quarterback.
oh man.
Oh God, what's
I'm
his
looking it
name?
up. Hold on. I'm Googling. You can
He was
continue
a
to
beast,
speak.
number 7. I can't remember the name off the
Was
top
it
of my
not
head.
Josh Freeman?
No, it was a white dude. He almost
Oh shoot, you're right.
he finished third in the Heisman voting.
Kansas State.
The name's on
Colin
the tip.
Klein. Colin
Colin
Klein.
Klein. Yeah,
Wow,
he was the
Colin
offensive
Klein. I forgot
coordinator
about
last year.
Colin Klein.
Right. So they haven't really been good since then. So
Right.
what are you what tradition what pearls are you clutching?
Right. No, for real. No, you're not wrong because like
It might be a good thing for everybody to
if
move
just a
on
little bit
and
of a reset and a move on
I
from
mean
here.
Bill Snyder has his name on the stadium. You're not going to forget about him. Like
Right. It's gonna be fine. But
yeah.
if it does get down to 2-5, that's gonna be really fun to watch because the Kansas State fans are gonna lose their minds. But
Let's talk about Oklahoma, man. Let's
yeah, let's just do
let's
it.
talk about something exciting. Uh
Uh, I, I mean, what is
Lincoln
there not to
Riley
say?
is Lincoln Riley a top 3 coach in college football right now?
Yes.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's had
I,
the most successful run of any first like 3-year coach in history, I
it's one
believe.
of the most unbelievable things that's ever happened in college football. Honestly.
Right.
Honestly.
It's
I
almost like Barry Switzer when he took over for Oklahoma in like the 60s.
right. I
Whenever
mean
that
it
was.
what Oklahoma has done the last few years is like I mean it is unprecedented and to have back-to-back Heisman Trophy winners.
Can he make it? Do you think he can make it 3 straight transfer Heisman Trophy winners?
I mean I wouldn't put it past him, but like man.
Hurts is just not the same guy, right? And
He's
that's what we can
not.
talk about.
Right. That's what the whole conversation is. Like Hertz is phenomenal. Like
He's a
Hertz is
machine.
Hertz
He's
is a great college football quarterback. Like
Mhm.
He's a great. And for today's version of college football, he's just about the perfect college football quarterback because he never ever turns the ball over ever,
Oh,
and
he doesn't make mistakes.
is a dynamic runner. And I feel like with what Oklahoma does offensively, I feel like this is going to sound weird. It's going to sound weird. And I'm just sort of coming to this now as we're sitting here having this conversation. I almost feel like in a weird way, Oklahoma's offense will be even more unstoppable with Jalen Hurts than it was with Murray or Mayfield, just because they sometimes made mistakes.
Now, I'm just gonna say though, look at the numbers. Look at the numbers for their offense last year.
Oh, well, no, they were literally the best offense of all time. But I mean, in terms of, I mean it just in the way.
In terms of efficiency.
Yeah, they're just like, how do you stop a team that?
But that's what's crazy, right? Is Lincoln Riley has created like Baker Mayfield is one of the most efficient like passers in college football history.
Right.
Right.
And then Kyler Murray was
Kyler Murray, right? And now he's getting a guy that is legit the hallmark of efficiency.
Right. So he's just getting to bring him in.
Right.
That's naturally efficient. Like those guys were not naturally efficient quarterbacks. Like Baker Mayfield's got a little Favre in him, right? Like he wants to sling it. And
Murray does too, to an extent.
Yeah, absolutely. And he made them remarkably efficient quarterbacks. So now you're getting a guy who like naturally.
He's a robot. He's the Kawhi Leonard of college football.
Wow, that's a really actually good comparison. He is the Kawhi Leonard of college football. That's a very good comparison. And so, Kawhi's out here winning finals MVPs. Can Jalen Hurts do something similar? I mean, that's the whole story, right?
Right.
Like, yes, they lost athletes. They lost athletes on the offensive side. They lost athletes on the defensive side, but they're Oklahoma, so they're just replacing them with other 5-star athletes. Like
the problem is the offensive line, right?
Right. Right. Well, and that's the whole problem. But Hurts can move, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Jalen Hurts can move around. He doesn't turn the ball over, so he'd rather take a sack than throw an interception.
And they have their best. I mean, Trey Sermon was awesome. Kennedy Brooks was even better. So they have two very experienced running backs. I mean, when you look at the numbers, it is pretty stupid. Kyler Murray had 4,000 passing yards and over 1,000 rushing yards. And they lost Marquise Brown, but they still have CeeDee Lamb and Grant Calcaterra at tight end.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, bro, 570 yards a game, 48 points per game, and a 96.6 offensive efficiency.
It's just dumb, man.
But here's the thing with Oklahoma when we talk about – because, I mean, obviously their big hopes is national championship, right?
Always.
And in order to do that, the defense has to improve, and I really, really think it will. I think this team is a legit title contender.
Well, and I guess the thing that helps the defense too is when your team doesn't turn the ball over. You got the most efficient quarterback in college athletics who's joining a team that has had the most efficient offense. He's a guy that isn't as much about the big play as Murray and Mayfield were. So, like, your offense will probably be on the field a little bit longer. Even though they're scoring at a similar rate, they'll probably take a couple more plays to do it per possession. And your defense brings back a lot. I think Oklahoma is a legitimate national title contender, like you said, because it's also like Texas is the only team that scares me.
Right.
I mean, nobody else is.
And you never know what's going to happen against Oklahoma State. Like,
sure. Yeah, every year. But like, on paper, which is all we can really do right now, right? Like, all we could do in these previews is go, okay, I'm looking at a team, I'm looking at their roster, I'm looking at their coach, I'm looking at their quarterback. How are they going to do? And all I could do when I look at the schedule is go, they're going to win every single game, right? I mean,
what will be interesting, and I think this is something that we can sort of talk about, the defense brings back 81% of its production from last year.
Right.
So they have to improve. Like, there's no –
they're going to
improve. Choice.
They have to.
Going to – right. But if the offense gets off to a slow start, right, and Jalen Hurts starts having these, same sort of problems that we saw at Alabama, right, does it open the door for another freshman quarterback to come take his job with Spencer Rattler, which is a perfect Oklahoma quarterback name. Like, he's already got that going.
Spencer Rattler.
And could we have another Tua Jalen Hurts situation?
It'd be a shame for Jalen Hurts. It also like isn't impossible. I guess the thing is like that's also my reality is like similar to what happened at Alabama. Like even if Hurts isn't great, they're gonna win the games, right? So like the choice that's gonna have to be made.
Where it
is
makes a
not-
difference is against the upper echelon teams, though,
right?
right?
But that doesn't happen until like midway through the season.
Right.
So they've got a few games to figure out. Do we think Hurts has enough to help us beat the best teams, or do we think we need to make that switch? I think Hurts is going to give them plenty.
It does pay off to figure that out early, though, like we saw last year with Clemson and Kelly Bryant, right? Where they were
Exactly.
like, Kelly's great.
Which also, can I say, as we're recording this, just earlier today, they talked about the news that Kelly Bryant is not getting a national championship ring. What a freaking what a joke. Kelly
Oh,
Bryant,
for real?
yeah, he's not getting a national championship ring from Clemson because he transferred. What a joke. What a classless move. Like, come on, Clemson. The guy won you 4 games out of your 15. Like,
Yeah, I mean, he was.
without him, like you're just throwing Trevor Lawrence into the fray. Of course he would have won all those games too. But like really, that's what we're gonna do right now. That guy who really contributed a lot to your program, who was there to help you in the transition after Deshaun Watson, like really that's how we're gonna handle things. That's how we're gonna handle things. That's classless, man. Come on, give the guy a ring. Like, and there's gonna be some sort of social media outcry, and then they'll give him one, and it'll be fine. But what a garbage way to handle that from the beginning.
It's a gutless
Especially
move.
considering the guy's at a school now that has a postseason ban. He can't win. He can't get a ring of any kind. So, like, come on. What are we doing here? Anyway, sorry. I just had to say that.
No, you're
we
good.
got our chance.
And we'll obviously talk about Kelly Bryant in a couple weeks when we get to the SEC. So
Right. But nonetheless, with Oklahoma, just last thing.
Yeah.
College football playoff team, right? Like, that's your expectation?
So.
Your expectation is undefeated college football playoff team?
They remind me a lot of 2015 Ohio State with Zeke Elliott, and I mean obviously they don't have a Zeke Elliott, right? But it's kind of built where they're going to try and run, like they're going to be very efficient
with 3 quarterbacks,
offense.
right? That was the team that had Barrett and Braxton Miller and Cardell Jones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they're going to be very efficient on offense, and if the defense improves like it should, then they're right in the conversation.
Yeah, well, and here's their rival, Oklahoma State, who they're the ultimate example of what I talked about at the beginning, which is like all these teams have been the same team for 15 years. Oklahoma State is still the same team. They can't defend anybody. They're going to score a shit ton of points. And
they've not been the same since that game. They've not been anything different ever since that game against Iowa State.
Oh, man. Yeah, like years ago. Yeah, they're just the same team.
That was their chance to break the shackles of being perennially Oklahoma's little brother, and then they went and lost to Iowa State. Iowa State had to watch Alabama play LSU in a rematch for the national championship.
Yeah.
I'll never forgive Brandon Weeden for that.
Brandon Weeden, my God.
Imagine how fun Brandon Weeden, Justin Blackman, Oklahoma State versus LSU game would have been for the national championship that year.
Chokers.
Instead, we got friggin' Bama clobbering LSU after we had already seen 9-6 in the game of the century.
That game, I hate that narrative of game of the century. What a joke. Nothing 9-6 can ever be the game of anything, not even in baseball. Okay. Let's move on. Oklahoma State. They're going to score a ton of points. They're not going to defend anybody. They're going to go 7-6 again, right?
They're going to win. They're going to win 7 to 8 games. Yeah.
Yeah, they'll be a bowl eligible team. They're not going to put on any sort of real threat. They might pull off one upset, but they'll also lose a game or two that they're not supposed to. And they're going to
get Oklahoma at home this year.
Yeah, which is always a benefit. I mean, you never know. Maybe that's the upset that they pull, but they're also going to go ahead and like lose a game to Baylor at home or go to, heck,
screw it, man. So inconsistent. Right?
Yeah, I mean, that's just the team that they've been. They've got TCU at home. Like, they could lose that game. They could go to West Virginia and lose, even though they're probably a little better than what West Virginia should be this season.
Like, if I told you in week 4 they go to Texas and beat Texas by 20 on the road, and then the next week they follow it up by losing by 4 to Kansas State? Would you be surprised?
That would sound so like Oklahoma State.
I,
It's like I feel like you're just coming back from the future, just telling me facts. Like
yeah.
that's at this point, like that would be so unsurprising because that's what Oklahoma State has been. Like Mike Gundy's a great coach. Like he's
Or
great.
or could you see like a situation where somehow they lose to Tulsa in week
And then beat
3, and
Texas.
then they beat Texas?
Absolutely. See, this is what I'm saying. Like this team has been that for a
Yeah,
decade.
they're literally a mullet. Like you don't know until they turn around what you got.
That's amazing. That's amazing. You're totally right. That's exact. They are the mullet. You got something in the front and something totally different in the back, and you
Yeah,
don't know what you're gonna get
it
at
depends on
any
what
point.
angle you're looking at them, right?
Oh my God, that's incredible. That's such a great analogy. But that's exactly what they are, man. Like they're just gonna be Oklahoma State once again. So somewhere between 6 and 8 wins,
They have a receiver in Tylan Wallace who's going to probably lead the nation in receiving.
Yeah,
Like,
always, bro. Like, yeah, and he's a stud, and then he'll go and he'll be a stud in the NFL, or he'll be a total flop because no matter how you look at it, Oklahoma State, you never know. Like, that's just what they do. I love that mullet. Oh my God, that's so good. I'm so
all right,
excited that you just said that.
another team that kind of is what they are is TCU, right?
Yeah,
But we've seen them recently be national title contenders. They were left out of that first playoff, as we had already mentioned.
right.
When they get the offense clicking, it becomes an interesting team to watch. But last year, they most certainly did not have the offense clicking.
No,
They
horrible.
played probably the ugliest bowl game I have ever witnessed in my life. I watched every second of it against Cal, and I hate myself for it, but it was just so
You're that guy.
ugly that game
Yeah,
was.
you are that guy. You are if you guys haven't picked it up by now by how much name recognition Meach has with all of these players, it's because he watches every college football game. And
Bro, I hate myself for watching that
torture. I remember you texting
abortion
me
of a
during
college
that game. I remember you texting me during that game and saying, "Hey, are you watching this TCU game because it's the worst thing I've ever seen and I love it." Like it was that's where you were. I remember vividly getting a text and I was like, "What do you mean am I watching the TCU game?" And you were like, "It's so bad that it's good."
Yeah,
Like
it was horrendously
yeah.
abusive.
Yeah, but that's what TCU was last year, and I kind of don't expect that much to change.
Well, who's playing quarterback for this team, right? Like
Right.
they have it's what is it, 4 or 5 weeks till the season kicks off, and they still have a 5-man quarterback competition going on.
Right, like that's ridiculous. That's not how
And
it
you
should
know
work.
what's sad is it's not like they don't have weapons. Jalen Rager might be one of the best receivers in college football.
It,
And they have Siwu Olanua, who also got into some legal trouble, although his was, firearm related. But
Jesus.
Darius Anderson. They have 2 running backs who are very good and a legit NFL wide receiver.
Right.
So whoever plays quarterback has weapons to work with. It's just, do you believe in them to do it? Because the offense hasn't been the same since 2014. Well, I mean, Kenny Hill had the offense clicking, but then the
Kenny
defense
Trill.
wasn't good.
Kenny Trill. Goat. I
September Heisman legend.
yeah, for like how many years in a row, too?
Like
Like
3
I think it was 3 straight years where Kenny Trill was everyone's favorite for the Heisman and never came close. But what I will say about TCU is like I think what you just mentioned does matter. Regardless of who ends up being their quarterback, we can laugh at them right now because they don't have a quarterback. They've got all these guys competing for the job. Anytime that's the case and you've got that many guys competing for the job, when it's not a extenuating circumstance, right? Like when there's
Right.
injuries to your quarterbacks and then all of a sudden, you've got a couple guys competing for the job into the fall, that's not like the most surprising thing in the world. It happens. But when really it's just because you can't figure out who it's going to be, that's not really ideal. It's the same situation that Miami's in right now, actually.
It's a little scary when no one is separating themselves of a
Right.
group of 4 to 5 guys.
Right. I mean, like you've got 3 guys in Miami and Tate Martell and Kosi Perry and Jaron Williams, where it's like you wish someone would just take the job. You got the same situation going on here at TCU, where it's like you got 4 or 5 guys and none of them are separating themselves. That concerns you. That said, like you mentioned, there are a ton of weapons for whoever that person is to work with, which is a benefit that whoever ends up being, even if they're not that great, and clearly they're not if they haven't separated themselves yet, they're going to have the benefit of playing in a conference that doesn't play a ton of defense, and they're going to have a ton of weapons on the offensive side of the ball. But this is a middle tier team this year, right? I mean, like, you can't expect much more than 7 or 8 wins, right?
Right.
Like,
Gary Patterson is one of the best coaches in college football, but it's just I mean, they were kind of the antithesis of a Big 12 team last year where they played very
yeah,
good defense and were putrid on offense.
right.
But and then so that was what carried them last year was their defense, right? But now you lose Ben Benangu, who was a first round pick, I believe, or he was first team all conference. And then LJ Collier was first team all conference. Those are the two guys that led you in sacks last year.
Right.
I think they combined, what's this, 8.5 plus. They had 20 sacks basically combined last year. They're gone. Nobody else on the team had more than 4. So you're replacing your 2 best pass rushers, who are also arguably your 2 best players on defense.
Right.
I mean, there's just not a lot here. But,
Yeah.
I mean, again, Gary Patterson's just consistent. If they won 7 games, okay, I'm not shocked.
Bowl eligibility.
They'll go to a bowl game.
Right. They're going to go to a bowl game. I think, like, their max ceiling is 9. Like,
I was really excited for them at the beginning of last season when they were up on Ohio State in week 3. They were undefeated. And then Sean Robinson just pissed the bed, and now he's also at Missouri. So,
right.
I don't know.
I can't expect much more than 7 wins, 6, 7 wins. But if they got to 8 or 9, would I be shocked because they have a great coach? No. I just think that they're. I will say, and we've looked at the schedule already a little bit, but their road schedule is not a piece of cake whatsoever. And for that matter, they got to go to Purdue. Like, that's not an automatic win out of conference. So 6, 7 wins. That's where TCU's at this point, and there will be a resurgence. Like, as long as Gary,
they'll be back at 9 to 10 wins in a couple of seasons.
Right. All they need is the right quarterback.
You just got to sort through the muck, right? Like, you got to get through the dark period to get back. And I mean, how many teams would kill to be in TCU's position where an off year for them, they still win 7 games and go to a bowl game?
Right. Like, being TCU at this point, it's really special what TCU
Kansas would give their left hand for that, right?
Yeah, honestly, like being TCU, considering where TCU came from, right? TCU was a quote-unquote group of 5 school, right? I mean,
we're in the Mountain West Conference.
Right, before we called things group of 5 and Power 5, they were one of those group of 5 schools, and they got the chance to end up in the Big 12. And
they have a Rose Bowl win in the last 10. They have more Rose Bowl wins in the last 10 years than Michigan does.
LOL at Michigan. I love our digs at Michigan. They're my favorite.
I'm going to get some rich Michigan graduate is going to put a hit out on us, and we're just both going to not show up somewhere one day.
No, it'll just be Stephen Ross. Anyway, Texas. Let's just move on before I start talking about Stephen Ross. The Texas Longhorns.
Are they back, Jeremy?
I hate the question, is Texas back, even more than I hate
it's such a meme, back. Dude. It's such a meme.
It's like, what does that even mean, is Texas back? What a moronic conversation that we constantly have to have revolving Texas. They're always overrated. They're always having all this hype for no damn reason. And that said, I think they're going to be really good this year. Like, it's for the first time in a long time, I actually do kind of believe that they're quote unquote back. Because Sam Ehlinger is a dog.
No, a dog is the perfect way to describe him.
He's a dog. Like, that guy is such a like, he's tough as nails, and he's like, well, honestly, different build, but it's like Colt McCoy. Like,
you know what I was gonna say?
What?
He's great value, Tim Tebow.
Ooh, great value, Tim Tebow. In terms of the
way they play is exactly the same, dude.
So he's like Publix brand. So it's like, instead of buying like the actual like Irish Spring body wash, you're just buying the Publix brand body wash.
Yeah, it's still good.
It's still great. It gets the job done. But it's, it's not the real brand.
Right.
I get that. I mean, that's fair.
Tom Herman was at Florida at the same time, right? We know he loves running his quarterbacks. He's built like a bulldozer, right? And he can. Yeah. And you want to know the dirty little secret, Jeremy?
Oh, why don't you tell me?
He's a little bit more efficient of a passer than Tim Tebow was.
You're telling
me he's not nearly the same. He's not nearly the same.
That Tim Tebow can't throw?
No, I'm not saying that at all. In college, he could, but he wasn't efficient. He still wasn't. But Sam Ehlinger in the air is an efficient passer, and he's about 65 to 75% of what Tim Tebow was on the ground, right?
Yeah, he's not the same, but it's something. And he's a power runner. It is, what I will say is Sam Ellinger is such an X factor, and does it so differently than anyone else in that conference has done in a long time, right? Because we've seen, we even mentioned Kenny Trill, right? Like we've seen we've seen even Kyler Murray, we've seen speed with the
quick
quarterback.
twitch quarterbacks.
Yeah, the guy that could throw, and then when things break down, Johnny, we've seen all sorts of different guys that have come through and been
Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, the quick twitch, like I'm gonna scramble now, not the we're gonna design run with our quarterback and pound it with them
straight up the middle of the field.
Yeah, and to see Sam Ellinger in this conference is going to be really fun with another year under his belt because, I mean, last year he was great, and now we're going to see, what he could really do with another full off season, to kind of learn the system, to come back with Tom Herman. Like, there's a lot of opportunity here. I don't know, man. I want to say, I want to say that they're gonna. I want to say that they can win the conference because I would like them to.
Right? I would too. I would like to see them win the
conference. Think everybody would like them to. I mean, look, people hate on Texas. I just hated on Texas right at the beginning of this because Texas gets the same.
They get the USC, but on a different level almost.
Right, like when we recorded our ACC thing and we talked about Notre Dame, and we both went, yeah, I don't know, it's 8-4, 9-3. Like, why the bleep are they preseason 7? Like, Notre Dame's not good. What? And it's the same thing. Texas.
Jeremy, I'm just going to stop you there. You're pissing off another fan base with a lot of money that could get us murdered.
I've called out thus far Texas, Michigan, Notre Dame. I won't go.
No shortage of donors ready to have a
fight on. Let's go USC. Fight on. But I will say, like, Texas gets that same treatment, and yet I feel differently about Texas because Texas is at least fun. Like Texas, even when they're bad, they're entertaining. They're sort of like the Raiders, right? Like where it's just like even when they're
a really good point.
It's kind of fun, Like we could be entertained by Texas no matter what. And I'm hoping that they have a great season. I will say it's very unfortunate for them because they got LSU.
But so do you think they're probably going to be the underdog against LSU, correct?
Which is helpful.
Tom Herman doesn't lose games as an underdog. He just doesn't.
You're right.
So I don't know what it is about it, but team, like, for whatever reason, even back when he was at Houston, they do not lose games where they are the underdog.
Well, and that being said, Sam Ellinger is the perfect quarterback to go against an SEC defense because of his toughness, because of his style. So them beating LSU would not be a shock to me.
Can you imagine having to tackle Sam Ellinger for 4 quarters?
Just like having to tackle him once, even?
Like, even if you were playing like middle linebacker, anytime he drops back, you're like, dude, if he tucks us, I'm going to be so pissed. That's just got to get old after. It's like getting hit by a battering ram over and over again.
Right. Well, and so to watch him have that success will be fun, but at least they get Oklahoma at home.
They get LSU at home too.
They get LSU at home, which matters. Hey, look, it's a huge difference from going to LSU.
Oklahoma is actually at the Red River rivalry, but
sorry.
there'll be a lot of Texas fans. It's still 50.
Honestly, my bad. I just started going through it. Obviously, it's the Red River rivalry.
We should go there. That would be fun. I'd like to go to the.
You want to go? All right,
we'll play the fried butter.
We'll plan after this. Let's figure out what weekend that is. Nonetheless, but what is tough is that they do have to go to TCU, to Iowa State, and to Baylor, and that sucks.
Because those are the upper middle class teams.
Those are the next 3 teams, right? Those are the next 3 teams.
And West Virginia, even to a certain extent.
Right, and they're right there also.
That's a pain in the ass road trip too.
So what's unfortunate is that they have to play all of those teams on the road. And so you got to imagine they're going to end up dropping one of them.
Yep.
And that's where the disappointment of the season can happen. Because could you imagine if they beat LSU and Oklahoma, and then they are they might be the number 1 team in the Clemson will be as long as they're undefeated. They might be the number 2 team in the nation if they go and beat LSU and Oklahoma, and then all of a sudden you like drop one at TCU.
But that would be the most Big 12 thing possible, right?
And the most Texas thing possible.
Yeah.
But
Not for nothing either, though. They do lose a lot on both sides of the ball. Lil Jordan Humphrey's gone on offense. 9 of their top 11 tacklers from last season are gone. I mean, you got
does
to
it
replace a lot.
matter? Like, does it matter? Like,
I think to some extent it has to. 9 of 11
yeah, but they
on your
recruit
defense.
so well. Like Texas. I know Texas is not. They're not the Oklahoma, Clemson, Alabama, Georgia level of recruiting, but they're that
Yeah, but
next
no one's
tier.
recruiting like those 5
Right.
teams.
Those four are at
And,
another
and
level.
Ohio State,
And
yeah.
Ohio State, right? Those five are on one level, and everybody else is on another. But Texas is in that next tier. So
Mm-hmm.
like they're
With
always
like
replacing
Washington,
guys. Yeah, yeah, and they're always replacing really good
Florida.
players. So they're gonna be fine. I guess the question that we should probably finish Texas with, and then we can wrap up the rest of the conference with our last two teams. But the place where we should leave Texas is like, how high should expectations be? So should Texas basically be in a space of it's we're going to the playoff or bust, or is it conference championship or bust?
I think getting back. I'm sorry. I think
No, go
getting
ahead.
back to the conference championship should be like obviously their main goal, and 10 wins as probably the bare like if you get to 12 wins you're in the you're in the playoff, right?
Right.
So 10 wins should be
Should be the
what they're
minimum.
aiming for, and anything after that I think is gravy.
Right, but if they only win 9 games, it's a disappointment of a season, right?
Right, for sure.
Yeah.
I agree with
Okay.
that.
I'm glad we're on the same page there.
I do also want to add Colin Johnson's a beast out at wide receiver.
I'm glad you added that.
Yeah,
Just so
and
that way when he shows out in a couple of weeks, then we can come back and just take that little
well,
clip and go, Colin Johnson's a beast at wide receiver. And then have one of those moments where then you see like a one-handed catch and they go, Colin Johnson's a beast at wide receiver. And
have
then
you
slow
seen
it down again. Like, Colin Johnson's a beast at wide receiver. And then,
have you seen those like it's been a trend lately where they make Twitter accounts called like out of context blank, and it's like from cartoons in our childhood.
yeah, we
We
can
should
just do that with this.
we should do an out of context
This
out of
is such a
context
good
preferred
idea.
Walk-Ons Twitter
This
account.
would be such a good idea because then anytime anyone that we mention does well, we can just take a clip of us talking about it. But that means we have to go back and find all of the people that we spoke about, which would be
Well, we
pretty.
gotta what we have to do is we have to get a Reddit community behind us and have them do it.
All right. Whichever one of the six of you are watching this, make a Reddit and then,
I've never been on Reddit, so I don't know how it works.
I don't know how Reddit works, but I see that people like it.
All
Anyway,
right.
Texas Tech. This one's spiraling. Texas Tech. They suck, right?
Um, yeah, I like Alan Bowman at quarterback a lot.
Yeah, I mean, like they're
Hopefully,
fine.
but I mean, it'll be kind of interesting. Matt Wells was really good as a coach at Utah State, so I mean, transitioning from the air raid will be hard. But TJ Vasher's back at wide receiver. Alan Bowman was legit like one of my favorite quarterbacks to watch while he was healthy last year.
Mm-hmm.
And even when he was hurt, Jet Duffy wasn't terrible either, but he's more of a running quarterback. So I mean, there's pieces there on offense to put something together, and it's just the defense has been so bad for so long. I mean, what else? What is there really to say, right?
Right. Well, I guess the big problem is that, like, the way that I look at it and the reason that I started it with they suck, right? Is how do you go from horrific defense, but at least you're going to score a ton of points because you're in the air raid, to now you're trying to readjust your offense, but your defense is still going to be bad. So,
Well,
like,
the defense might not be as bad. Like it did
okay, but
start
it's
to improve.
always bad. Like, I'm not saying it's going to be the
Yeah, but was that more of a
100
function of the coaching and the offensive system? I mean, shout
combo.
out to Cliff Kingsbury holding on to the longly held tradition of handsome white men failing upwards, but
The
like
best, the biggest example, He couldn't win at Texas Tech, and he got a head coaching job in the NFL. It's amazing.
shout out to Cliff Kingsbury. I do love
Honestly,
the air raid though. I do have
who doesn't love Cliff Kingsbury?
to.
Yeah, I mean, come on. But
But if they made a bowl, that would be great for them because
right, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
don't think it's spelling out a bowl right now.
Right. Well, that's all I'm saying. They were 5-7 last year. I think that would be a totally reasonable expectation again. Like,
And they have pieces to build with, right? Alan Bowman
right.
is exciting. Matt Wells has done well developing quarterbacks.
Has done Wells.
Yes,
Ha,
exactly.
ha.
Matt Wells has done Wells at developing
Matt
quarterbacks.
Wells has done real good. I
And,
guess the thing that I guess all I'm trying to say with them is like I don't expect more than 4 or 5 wins because
mhm.
they're this year is not a rebuild or a reset, but it's just like one more year of before maybe next year they're good. Like it's
It's a
just this
year
isn't
zero,
their year.
right?
There's too many
It's like
other
what we've talked about. It's a year zero where
yeah,
the
there's too many
coaches,
other good teams. There's just too
right?
many other good teams in this conference for them to have a lot of success. That's all.
Because Matt Wells comes from that Boise coaching tree. So
Yeah.
what's you want to do? You got to establish the culture because that's one of the biggest things. And then you start, the offense has a lot of shifts and motions, and the defense progressively gets better year in and year
Exactly.
out. And then by the time Alan Bowman's a senior, maybe you have a team that's competing for 8, 9 wins in the conference.
Exactly. That's all I'm trying to say. It's like this is
Establish the
not the
culture.
year. Yeah.
Whatever wins you get is gravy.
Exactly. That's the whole thing. Texas
It
Tech
could be
is in that.
worse.
Yeah.
It could be Kansas.
Right. I mean, like at least you've been good, and like we all know Texas Tech will win a game they're not supposed to win.
Oh, I
Every
mean,
year. Every
yeah.
year they win a game they're not supposed to win. So they'll do it again, regardless of who their head coach is and who their quarterback is. But again, 4 or 5 wins feels about right for Texas Tech at the bottom of the conference. And then lastly, there's West Virginia, who's like what? Like the
Yeah,
weirdest team. The
you could tell me West Virginia comes in Neil Brown's first season and wins, like they win the conference, and I would be like, okay, that's surprising, but like also I could see it.
right, and you could also tell me that they finished with 4 or 5 wins, and I wouldn't be like
Right.
totally shocked, just because we have no idea what to expect. They're a completely different team.
They
If
have
you
a new coach, right? And their quarterback is a transfer who's been at OU this whole time behind Baker Mayfield and
right, so
Kyler.
we have no idea what he is.
I mean, for all we know, he could be like on the level of Kyler
Right,
Murray.
he could be that good. He could be
Yeah.
great because he was just behind 2 Heisman Trophy winners, right? So
I
like,
will say this: Neil Brown, while he was at Troy,
mhm.
his defenses were incredible, and
Yeah,
like a lot of times he got credit for the offense because he's an air raid guy,
mhm.
right? And so that was kind of what people would talk about with Troy, but really it was their defense. Didn't they beat LSU?
Troy
Like,
beat LSU. Yes,
yeah,
Troy beat LSU under
more Tigers.
right.
But I mean, if you look just like at the sheer numbers that they lost on offense last year, like Will Greer's gone, their 4 leading like wide receivers are
Yeah,
gone.
bro.
Yandi Kajust is gone, and he was a first round like left tackle. So
How do you lose? They lost. They lost like they literally lost more production than some entire teams have. You know what I
just
mean?
in
Like,
general, yeah.
right? Because they scored at such a crazy rate and they had such a crazy high like level of yardage per game that like with just the quarterback and wide receiver combos that they literally lost as much offense as other teams have in an entire season. So it's like ground zero for West Virginia, and not in a bad way. Sorry, that implies bad. But what I mean is like it is a total fresh start in terms of brand new quarterback that like either could be a star because he's just been sitting behind stars or could be a total dud. Like I mean, he could be Blake Barnett. Like you know what I mean? Like we have
Or what was that? Weren't there like those 2 Purdue quarterbacks that went to Florida and LSU, Danny Etling and oh god, what was the other one? But you get my point, right?
yes.
There was
There's
eh,
these guys that sit and you just think like, oh well,
like, could he be
never
like
got
Joe
their shot.
Burrow, like with LSU, where like he starts
Right.
off slow, but then
But gets better.
at the end of the year, Joe Burrow was arguably a top 10 quarterback in the country,
Which
right?
is bizarre because Joe Burrow was like,
Oh, he's tough, dude. He's a tough
I
son
don't
of
know
a.
how that happened because you watched that first game, like even though they dominated against Miami in that first game last year, he was just super average. Like it made me think. All it did was make me think really low of Miami, not really high of LSU, because I was like, Joe Burrow's just whatever. They're just dominating.
He's another LSU
He was
quarterback,
just some
right?
dude. But by the end of the year, I was like, wow, this guy can actually really play, and he proved it against UCF. I mean, he really played well in that game.
Yeah.
But I will say.
And we finally got our UCF reference.
Oh yeah! Wow, it lasted all the way until here. Look at that. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
we made it 1 minute in the
Wow.
last episode, and this one's at the end of this one. That's good.
Wow. Good for us. I didn't even realize. Wow. Huh. Who knew? I should have made a reference earlier about TCU and the Big 12 and UCF and USF should be in there and whatever. All right. But anyway, just to wrap it up with West Virginia, they're in a position where like it's like you said, I think that where we started with Baylor and Iowa State, who are probably the most interesting because they're probably the next two teams after Texas and Oklahoma. West Virginia is one of the most interesting teams in terms of they have the most volatility. They have the highest upside and downside combination in the conference. Like it's like you mentioned, they could come in and absolutely wreck everybody with a quarterback who just hadn't gotten his shot and got to learn from Lincoln Riley for a couple of years, or he could be average. Their new head coach could be trying to bring in all sorts of new systems. They could have a bunch of athletes that don't really commit, and they could have to start totally from scratch.
I
Neither
will
would
say
surprise.
their early season schedule is super interesting because they're playing teams that are kind of in the same boat as them, right?
Totally.
With Missouri,
What's
what
Kelly
is
Bryant?
Missouri going to be? What is we said basically the same thing about NC State is they lost all this production on offense. So like I don't know what to expect.
Yeah, those are actually it is a weird thing that all three of those teams, West Virginia, Missouri, and NC State, are all in very similar positions. But West Virginia is just like I got to imagine they're right around 8-4 again.
Yeah, I mean that's a perfectly good season too.
That's a really solid. If they get to 8-4, they should feel really good about it because when you lose a guy that was a mid-season, early season Heisman Trophy candidate and a head coach that's obviously in Dana Holgorsen, that's a very good head coach. If you can bring in a new head coach and a new quarterback and still be right around the same and only trending up, you'd have to feel pretty good about it.
Yeah, for sure. And last thing on West Virginia is it just such a strange place for a Big 12 team to be. Like
it's absolutely bizarre.
Their home game, like that's a very distinct home field advantage that I don't think gets talked about enough.
Well, because the way you got to travel to Morgan,
Texas Tech to West Virginia is basically a cross country flight.
Yeah, you're right. It's a very, I mean, it also hurts for them on the road, but it is a nice home field advantage when they do get it. What's funny is we just had this hour-long conversation about the Big 12, and I started it by saying all of these teams have been basically the same team for 10 to 15 years. We had this whole conversation, and what did we decide? The exact same thing. Oklahoma and Texas are at the top. Oklahoma State's going to pull off an upset. West Virginia's going to be really volatile. Baylor's probably going to be decent along with Iowa State, and Texas Tech is going to suck. But they're going to
Kansas State and Kansas.
Kansas State and Kansas are still bad. Here we are, exactly the same conference as when we started this conversation.
All right, everybody. Thank you all so much for listening. Next week, we will be back with what's next? Pac-12, right?
Yeah, right. That's how the alphabet works.
One of the more boring conferences in the Power Five. Probably
the most boring. It is the most boring, and it's the worst, and they shouldn't be considered a Power Five.
But here we are. So we'll be back with that, and then finally after that, we have the SEC, and then the season starts, and we're going to really start rolling. So looking forward to talking to everybody next week.
Yeah, get mentally prepared for all of our annoying UCF tweets. Love you.
Yeah.